It is with great pleasure and frankly an honor and genuine curiosity that we are hosting Bill Regli today. Dr. Bill Regli, Dr. William Regli, I actually know from my time at DARPA, where Bill was deputy director and then acting director of the best office at DARPA, Defense Sciences Office. I mean, without question, DARPA's DARPA. He is currently a professor of computer science at the University of Maryland, College Park, which was where I was prior to coming to USC. I saw the light. Bill's still stuck in the University of Maryland dark age. That's fine. I also know him personally as the founding director of the Applied Research Lab for Intelligence and Security, which is at UARC at University of Maryland. So Bill seems to have this knack for wanting to do really hard and oftentimes thankless things, but doing them because they're really important for the country. So he's been there. He was at RLS 2018, 2023. Then he moved to become a senior advisor for the White House in the Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is another way of ensuring you don't get any sleep, is my understanding. So excited to hear a little bit more about that. Professor and Associate Dean at Drexel University in the past, positions at Lockheed Martin, AT&T. And he's got a wealth of different research areas and foci. Again, partly why I'm really excited to have him here is he has a true gift of being able to tie together different threads. And in an area like AI, where my unofficial motto is, if you're not confused, you're not thinking clearly. We need people who can tie these threads together. So without further ado, I will hand over to Bill, asking one question before you start. Would you like to wait to the end to have questions so you can tell the narrative, or do you want questions during?
Well, this is 17 people on Zoom, so it's not crazy. And if you have, what do we have, 90 minutes blocked out, right? Or
is it right? We have 90?
60.
60? Oh, I'm holding the chunk. I didn't know how long yet. So the answer is it depends. If you put the questions in the chat, I have the chat window up and I'll try and track it.
I'll track as well, the questions. Yeah. If it makes sense, we'll jump in. If not, we'll do it at the end.
Yeah, and I tend to talk fast, so the issue is I do a lot of transmit, so if there's some little thing that catches and you want to go down a rabbit hole or offer an extra insight, I mean, I'm just the how shall I say? I'm the Sherpa on the journey here, or the boatman taking us across the river. I'm not quite sure which, but feel free to interrupt if you want to have little tangents or anything like that, because there's a lot, so thank you, Adam, first of all. Really appreciate the chance to share this with you all. This talk was something I forced myself to create last fall. I was basically coming off of running RLS, coming off of my time at the White House, and I realized I'd been on this journey for about 10 years. From when I basically showed up at DARPA in 2014 to now. I'm a lifelong nominally AI person. I'm a good old-fashioned AI person. Back in the 90s, I worked on automated planning and reasoning for automated manufacturing. It was, pretty cut and dry. You got to build a representation, you figure out what the engineers are thinking, and then you build tools to augment their decision-making, right? That's pretty straightforward. Now we're in a totally different world. And for me, the journey really started when I showed up at DARPA in 2014, and it was the fall where Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking and others said we're all doomed. And Arthi Prabhakar, the director at the time, asked some of us on the leadership team to kind of help her make up a policy about like how's she going to respond to all this. So this talk is really an amalgam of kind of my journey, and it's kind of me trying to make sense of everything that's going on and figure out rationally what I, as a professor and also as a citizen, might possibly do in this world of AI. How shall I react personally, and also as a researcher, what should I work on? But you'll see in this actually a lot of the insight I gained during my time at the White House, where I was asked in the wake of the executive order in 2023. Yes, 2023. I'm losing track of the years, Adam. In the fall of 2023, the executive order came out, which has since been revoked, looking at AI, in particular AI as used by the government. And I was asked by the director to think about the sort of the DARPA question, which is, well, if we do everything right, what could still go wrong? What are the risks associated with AI's use by the government? And I went on a journey over about 6 months, and I kind of produced some report that's on a hard drive somewhere at the old executive office building. And that really left me kind of with this impression I felt like I had to share. Kind of here's sort of what I've learned on this journey. So anyway, that's the point of this talk. And let me cut right to it. So here I am as a professional. This is sort of where I start personally. And I know Adam's used this before. Richard Hamming, Turing Award winner, used to ask the junior researchers at Bell Labs over lunch, what are the important problems in your field? And then he'd ask them, what are you working on? And it would turn out the junior researchers would say, well, they're working on this, but the important problem was this other thing. And I'm basically trying to ask this for myself. What are the important problems and why aren't I working on them? So I'm going to work on AI stuff. What should I be doing? So here we are. This is the question today, the AI Hamming question. There's a spectrum on the one side. Excuse me here. I was trying to move a window here. I'm out of practice here with presenting over Zoom. The pandemic did end, I think. All right, so we have a spectrum. On the one end is AI is awesome. Everything is awesome. Butterflies, rainbows, and unicorns. It's going to be great. On the other side is the Fermi paradox, game over, AI is going to destroy everything. This is kind of the two narratives we hear fighting it out. And I kind of feel like I'm locked in the middle somewhere. And I'm trying to make sense of this, right? On the one hand, there's these narratives that fall under the doomer category, where AI is bad. At the end of the day, it's going to enable something bad to happening. We got to control it. Our freedoms, it's going to have alignment issues, and we're going to die by paper clips. And then on the other hand, it's going to improve science and innovation, and I'm going to be able to solve fusion, and I'm going to be able to build basically, new kinds of scientific devices that I was not able to do before. So the boomers on one side, doomers on the other. Where am I in this story? So I was trying to wrestle with how to talk about this, and it was last summer. I guess it was end of August when I started working on this talk, and I was trying to come up with a framework, and I realized like, I was like, what's the story? Like there's a guy and he's always an optimist, and then there's another guy who's always a pessimist. And I was like, oh, it's the story of Candide. And so here's my liberal arts undergraduate degree making itself present, where I try to interpret life through the art that I've been exposed to. And what I did is I went and reread Candide, and I said, yeah, this is exactly where I'm at. I'm like Candide. I'm on this journey. I'm a naive guy walking through life. And the story of Candide, for those of you who don't know, it's about basically a young man who's on a journey, and he has some mentors. And he's the son of a nobleman, and he's trying to basically woo a woman, and whatever. There's a whole bunch of little vignettes. And this is a farce that Voltaire tells about basically a young person being exposed to the world, and the world is horrible. There are people doing murders and rapes, and there's slavery and other stuff. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And then there's two voices in his head. One is Dr. Pangloss, who says this is the best of all possible worlds. Everything is awesome. He can't see anything wrong. It's great. And then on the other hand, there's Martin, again, one of his mentors, who says, let's work without reasoning. It's the only way to make life endurable. There's these two spectrums. And at the end, well, we'll get to that at the end of the lecture. I started to think of this like, oh, it's not Dr. Strangelove. It's for me, it's sort of like Dr. Pangloss. Like, what's the way in which I relate to AI today and come to sort of live with where we are? So this is kind of the framing. And here's what I want to take you on a little journey in this talk. And again, I'm kind of preaching to the choir. I know a number of the people that are online. I'm thrilled to see you all there. So in some sense, I know I'm preaching to an audience that might be, if this was a revival meeting, there'd be shouts, I hope, because some of these things come from experiences I've had with some of you. So here we go. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll walk through, first of all, what is AI and what's fundamentally changed? How do I want to frame this? Because the press and the current buzzwords that are out there, let's sort of make this as simple as possible. What's fundamentally changed? Given that it's changed, what do I need to worry about now, right? What do I really practically need to worry about? And if we can come up with a framework, then we can say, all right, given this framework, how might I be surprised? And where are the surprises going to come from? And then what might I do about this? So I'm going to try and provide some kind of, in my mind, like a practical reference architecture for how we might think of these things. So first, let's talk about what is AI and what's fundamentally changed. Okay, and I'm not going to define AI as a whole. I want to come up with something really simple. Here's the basic idea. This is the classic view of AI from Russell and Norvig from the AI text, is that AI is a thing, usually software, that takes in perceptions from the world through the sensors, and then actuates the world and takes actions in it, right? And it could be a software robot working on the internet. It could be a real robot. At the end of the day, this is the OODA loop, right? That the AI is executing. It could be a chatbot. It could also be, AlphaGo. Doesn't matter. So the thing is, what is in the box? And I want to keep it really simple because what's in this box is basically a function. We're doing some kind of function approximation, right? We have some perceptions that come in the top and some actions come in the out. It's going to be basically function approximation. I give you a chessboard, it'll give me a move. If I give you some string of text, you're going to give me an answer to that string of text based on this function. So this hasn't really changed. But what has changed is this function is now computing something that is deceptively cognitive. A chessboard or an optimization problem or a schedule for FedEx, that's kind of like numeric. I sort of get it. I'm basically trying to arrange things in a manner that, optimizes some function. I get it. But what's happened now, because of the nature of the generative AI techniques and the capabilities that are built on this layer cake of more primitive algorithms, is now suddenly the AI is doing things that as a human being, I might interpret as being more abstract. So this is the classic knowledge management hierarchy. This is from the Army Knowledge Management Community of Practice, but you've seen this maybe before. The idea that at the bottom, I'm just going from data to information. Data is numbers. Information is adding up the numbers in the column of the spreadsheet. Information to knowledge. Suddenly I'm doing profit loss tables, right? And then at the top, judgment and understanding. Then I'm coming up with a business plan. And I might have judgment about like how and wisdom of how I'm going to basically deploy my assets to increase profits, right? So again, another simple analogy is the Babylonians had star charts. They had the data. Basically, it took Tycho Brahe to organize the data information into information, and then Johannes Kepler figured out what the equations were that made up the data, right? So it's a kind of abstraction as you go up the hierarchy. So what's happening now is these large language models basically interact with us at a much more cognitive level, all of a sudden, really within the last, 5 to 7 years, right? This is from my work at DARPA with my colleague, Brian Pierce. One of the things we talked a lot about was the fact that AI is moving up this kind of axis. If you look at the chart in the upper left, right, data is down in the corner. And what we're doing is there's a strategic level of abstraction in one direction and kind of a cognitive load in the other direction, right? And what's happening is the tools are getting better and better and moving further up this this axis, right? So this is what's changed, and it's a form of amplification that we didn't have quite as starkly before, right? We had the hints of it, obviously, but what we're seeing all of a sudden, it's like accessible to everybody, right? So this has changed, fundamentally changed. So now if that's what's changed, what's it mean to be concerned? What's risk look like? And what are people saying? So these tools have become ubiquitously available, and I'm now able to access them, on my own laptop. I can have these tools read my own PDF files and give me answers. All right, so what's risk look like? All right, so here's the bottom line up front of my assessment of risk. And this comes out of a lot of reading, a lot of text messages with friends like Adam and chasing down various references, but and also a survey I did last spring where I basically talked to about 70 experts too. So here's sort of 4 things that I assess about risk today. First of all, is most risk activity, when you think of risk and you read about it in traditional AI conferences and journals, risk is mostly techno-philic. It focuses on fixing the algorithm so there's no bias. I'm going to ensure the alignment of the algorithms. I'll look at the algorithm's performance against some sort of qualitative test. And of course, you hear the story about, oh, I need more data, it's going to be better. It's all focused on making the tech better. That's kind of the dominant narrative in my view. But we do see that there's folks who have pointed out that amplification risks are real. And I'm going to talk about what that really means on the next slide. But amplification, I point to this report from Rand up in the upper right corner. Basically, amplification is that cognitive uplift, right? Whether you're a programmer and now you can have a team of agentized programmers working for you. So you as a programmer are 10x more productive. Or if you're a bad actor, if you're the Ted Kaczynski or Shinrikyo, you now have basically PhD level assistance available to you through some of these agents, and your goals of making a hazardous device might be easier to fulfill because you basically have been made smarter by the devices. So these risks are real, and you see them in chem, biological, cyber, and other arenas. Externality risks are largely overlooked. And here we're talking about the economic notion of a negative externality, and I'll give some examples of that. And then lastly, and this is a rabbit hole we could go down, but I think we just want to touch on the fact that the existential risk part gets a lot of attention, probably a disproportionate amount of attention. People talking about we got to achieve AGI, and there are a lot of things that are like in my face, whereas these maybe are a little more abstract. And my goal in this talk is let's talk about the stuff that's in my face, because the journey to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So let's figure out what we have to do one step at a time. So this is my bottom line up front, and here's basically first I want to tell you what an amplifier is, because we're going to talk about each of these for a bit and give you some framework here. So first is a cognitive amplifier, where and how. So this came out of some work that the Defense Science Board did in 2016, and I've drawn on this in a couple other contexts, including some work for the Air Force, where you're trying to summarize, like, okay, what's AI going to do? Like, it's not this abstraction until I start to use it. Now I got to think, okay, how am I going to use it? And there's this marvelous analysis they have, which is talking about, okay, where is autonomy going to work? And you start to think about this and you're like, oh, really tells you what it's going to do. It's an amplifier. It's either going to amplify complexity and scale, meaning numbers, right? Or, if I need to pilot drones, I can do 100 drones instead of one, right? I can have chatbots, many number, right? So there's an amplification that occurs, which is related to scale. There's another which is related to integration. I've read all these documents, or the language model has read the documents, so it may be able to see things that I can't possibly see as a human. So there's an amplification vector that way. And then the last amplification vector has to do with speed. And in that case, it could be really long or it could be really slow, right? So I can use AI to work cyber, where things are happening at microseconds, right? Making decisions really fast. I can delegate my authority to the AI and I can increase my speed, or I could go the other way. I can have persistent surveillance, or I could operate a robot on a planet, a distant planet, right? So it's another form of autonomy. So these are really we'll call it sort of three coupled, obviously, vectors, where AI is going to basically like turn it up to 11 on each of these, right? Depending on the application. When people talk about harm, there's been some taxonomic work to sort of classify harms. So if you're deploying AI, is the AI causing the harm? What's it to? Is it to the financial? Is it environmental? Is it other? This is from CSET. I think this is the CSET one. On the lower left is from CDAO, the DoD's office that was looking at AI integration. These are kind of the effectors that it could occur. You'll see a lot of stuff like this. NIST has a thing called the Risk Management Framework, which was very influential. And I think Adam could talk a little about this because he's past affiliate with the NIST AI Safety Institute. But what you take out of this is the bottom 2 points. One is that AI technology could be used by an actor to do something, and that could create a harm. That's the Shinrikyu example, for example, right? But the other one is that I could have it as a byproduct, possibly created by an actor doing something else or a hostile one. But it's not, it's either a byproduct of the AI technology itself or AI's effect on something more traditional, right? The AI might be fine, but now I deploy it in a system and it's going to have effects. And those effects aren't going to be fixed by fixing the AI. It has to do with where the AI sits in the system. So you can kind of boil these two examples into kind of cognitive amplification risk and externality risks, right? So what's an externality? So this is a classic notion from economics, right? A negative externality is the marginal social cost borne by somebody else, right? It's, for example, secondhand smoke in order to give people freedom for smoking. It's the deaths we accept from gun violence so that we can have the Second Amendment. It's air pollution because we want to have power, and power is often based on fossil fuels, right? So there are many negative externalities associated with AI that create great risk that we're not actually currently able to really calculate. So one of them is intellectual property, right? So this is a big, major negative externality, and I'll just, I just let people speak for themselves, really. I'm just like taking you on a journey through my reference list. OpenAI declares AI race over if training data isn't all allowed for fair use. I mean, like, this is a huge land grab, right, on the part of a certain company that says, well, we need all the data. Well, what's that mean for IP? Basically, you've sort of opened the West up and said, yeah, drill anywhere. Yeah, sure, that geyser, fine, just drill on the geyser, right? So I put the image generator there on the bottom. That's one of the latest things, which I love Miyazaki movies, but now there's a Miyazaki image generator. What's the ethics of that? I don't know. But this is a huge, essentially, form of theft, right? That we haven't figured out how to measure. Another one that's shown up is people beginning to, again, wrestle with these externalities. This is one that's looking at the public health cost that is imposed by the extra data centers and the pollution associated with them. This is a paper actually by Caltech and UC Riverside. And, people are beginning to try and figure out how to wrestle with these questions. Counter argument, I point out the fact that this is just the public health cost. It doesn't talk about the benefits, right? There's obviously a plus side here, but I kind of hard to quantify that, right? So it's just presented as an accepted good, and nobody's really sort of balanced it. Yeah, all right. Every time I give this talk, I think of changing the order of the slides. So there's a slide I think I want next. It'll come up in about 3 slides. But all right, so this is the externality risks. And then lastly, I wanted to mention the AGI, et cetera, discussion. There's a lot of opinions out there. I don't even weigh into it in this talk because it's a whole other talk in and of itself. But know that there are, regardless of whether I think this is going to happen, doesn't matter. Other people do, right? So we are living in a world where there's certain beliefs associated with the advance of this technology, and we have to be aware of those. And these are just some of the more recent references. The history here, for those who might not have followed it over the last 15, 20 years, the original idea of a superintelligence explosion goes back to Ian Good, who was a mathematician who worked with Turing at Bletchley Park and then was at Virginia Tech for many years. And he wrote a paper about the intelligence explosion. This was talked about by Nick Bostrom in 2003. Now a lot of this is like wrapped up in this movement called the TESCRAL movement, which stands for transhumanism, extraterrestrial, AI. There's a bunch of other stuff in here, but it's basically everything that is associated with moving beyond humanity as it is today. The effective altruism movement came out of things in the last decade. This is a philosophical movement that says we should earn as much money as we can and then give the money to the causes that we care about. And AI risk is obviously one of those movements, and many of the supported projects come from that movement, right? And the currently where are we is certain folks say, scaling laws, AGI is coming. There is a set of skeptics, of course, who say these beliefs are basically quasi-religious, right, and not testable. But it does take up a lot of oxygen in the room. I present this diagram here from Nick Bostrom, and it's actually kind of useful because I don't think we've done a very rigorous assessment of how much of a risk the AI poses, right? I mean, the existential risk requires like extinguishing humanity, and it's even hard to, in his view, hard to imagine even climate change extinguishing humanity, right? So anyway, I just presented to acknowledge it, and my personal belief is that I'm more on the skeptic side because I want to see scientific testable hypotheses, so I know how much I need to worry about and when. But which gets to this, right? So here we are. All right. So gave you kind of what I thought AI was, and then I said, all right, here's AI risk today, what everybody's worried about. All right. Now let's come up with some practical approach to think about impending surprise and obviously risk. So I just present this as the perfect quote, which is Calvin telling Hobbes, the truth is most of us discover where we're headed when we arrive. And I feel that is kind of the case here, right? So here's where we're at, right? Full speed ahead, ludicrous speed, right? There's going to be risks. Bad stuff's going to happen. So how might we ask practical questions, reduce their probability and severity of the risks that we might find, and then improve our use of AI over time? So what I hope to do here is coalesce some things that might be useful. They proved useful to me in understanding the problem. I don't think any one thing I've done is particularly novel. I'm not presenting you scientific results. I'm kind of giving you a framework with which to think about these problems. So, first part of the framework. Let's think about risk as a matrix, otherwise popularly known as the Rumsfeld matrix, but it actually exists in risk management literature prior to Rumsfeld. And in the upper right-hand corner, the red box, is your classic unknown unknowns, zero-day risks. We've never seen it before, right? And we don't have the scientific understanding of what's up there or the engineering know-how. Sort of by definition, we don't know what's in the upper right-hand corner. And in this matrix, right, you have unknowability of the approach to solving the risk and then how much you know the risk, right? So the upper left is, I know what the risk is, but I don't understand it scientifically. I don't understand it well enough to build a solution. I know the thing is there, but I'm at the limit of my human knowledge. On the lower right, turns out I actually could have solved it, but I didn't know it, right? So this is like the yin and the yang here. The upper left is I have a scientific gap in my understanding. In the lower right is I have an engineering gap in my processes or in my um, comprehensiveness of how I'm designing systems. I could have solved it, but I didn't see it. And then, of course, in the lower left is I have a known risk and I actually have an approach to solve it, right? So now if we apply this framework, we could start to look at where some of the stuff we hear about around AI might fall, right? So let's see. So we've seen this before. So again, this is just illustrating kind of what each concept is. Upper left corner, known risk, unknown solution, right? When we first invented steam power and railroad engines and boilers, boilers would explode because we didn't have material science and we didn't understand metal fatigue. So we knew there was a risk, but we didn't really know how to control it. The picture of the Venetian doctor during the plague, right? We knew the plague was a thing. This was the best we could come up with. Somehow, if we could control the inhalation, maybe we wouldn't catch it. And of course, not to belabor the recent news, but we know there are financial things that occur in our free market economy, and we don't really know how to solve those, right? So on the right is the place where we knew how to solve it, but we had a failure of imagination. So it's well known that it was documented that O-rings, if it was below freezing, you shouldn't launch the space shuttle. But they launched it anyway, right? Hydrogen, we knew, is a flammable gas. And yeah, it keeps the airship afloat, but, maybe we shouldn't have done that. And then, in the lower right is the most recent collapse of the bridge in Baltimore, which, again, you don't assume a boat is going to run out of power, have a failure, and hit the bridge, but you could have, and if you did, you might have been able to stop it. So, on the right's a failure of imagination, on the left, it's a failure of scientific know-how, right? Negative externalities, again, we've seen these before. The fog of London, right? This was a byproduct of the burning of coal. Obviously, Pittsburgh, we had it in Pittsburgh. If anybody's aware of the story around the Hanford site, we're going to spend a couple $100 billion cleaning up the Hanford site, but we did win World War II, and the Cold War. So would we have done the Hanford site if we knew that? Maybe not, right? We do this now. So here's a negative externality that we routinely accept. And I put this here because I was shocked when I found this out. This is from Department of Transportation, a report about the societal and economic impact of motor vehicle crashes in 2019. And the estimate is that in 2019, our American love of personal transportation, the automobile, cost us $1.5 trillion in terms of insurance, medical, and all the rest, right? And 45,000 deaths. And you sort of think, wow, we had some AIs. Would I accept 50,000 deaths a year and $2 trillion in costs from AI? What would be worth doing that for? And who would benefit from it? I don't have an answer, but look, this is the kind of Faustian question that I think societally we're facing with some of these questions. So going back to this matrix, the big takeaway for me was risk is not some abstract technological concept that I can fix by beating the algorithm into submission, by making sure I can't fool the image recognizer with stickers on the stop signs, or having the chatbot monitor the previous, the hierarchy of chatbots monitoring chatbots for alignment, whatever that happens to mean. Risk is going to depend specifically on the AI use case. So some of the keywords that you hear about today, like hallucinations, it's a known problem. We don't have enough science to understand why it exists. And so it falls in kind of the upper left-hand corner, right? Things like data privacy, it's a known problem. We don't know how to extract my technical papers from the training data set that OpenAI uses, for example. In the lower left corner, there's a lot of stuff that actually we could probably solve today if we just chose an approach in the context of the application where we're using the system, right? And I'll provide an example of that going forward with regard to things like bias. And then on the right, it's going to be questions that I could solve if I had better engineering processes, right? So AI is never done. I deploy it. It's going to be used and updated in, essentially for the life of the system. So I need better standards. I need to understand how to do system acceptance and stuff like that. So let's talk about then how I might use this kind of framework to now assess risk in a given context, right? Because it's a framework. All right, okay, now I got a context. So the insight that occurred to me, and some others are talking about this, is, okay, we got to do AI red teams, right? All right. Well, let's think about cyber and use like a cyber engineering security process to think about how to handle AI risk. And if you read like key text, like Ross Anderson's, the late Ross Anderson's text, you actually have to figure out what is actually at risk and what's the threat, and then create a policy or response to mitigate or reduce the probability of risk. And the thing is, again, going back to the techno-philic view, if you're not talking about a specific asset and a specific threat vector, you're just like talking about, I want to build a firewall. Well, for what? Like, I need to have a scenario, right? So we must determine what's at risk and how it rises out of the AI use case. So think like cyber. We're going to find a use case, specify the AI technology, map the risk landscape, i.e. what could possibly go wrong, look at the risk vectors, hostile actor, error, externality. I'm going to amplify things. What happens if the proverbial AI tire blows on the car, right? And then you can assess the level of harm. You've seen there's ways to do that. And then you could design remediations for the risk. And designing remediations, we've been here before. We've done stuff like this, right? You've seen matrices like these, which are talking about, severity of risk, probability of risk, right? Maybe with AI, there's like existential risk is kind of on the right. So we can take a defense in depth type of approach. You want to prevent the risk, detect it when it happens, respond to it so the harms are reduced, and then recover, right? This is the basic idea. And the lesson from engineering practice is that some risks just are. Best you're going to do is reduce the probability of the risk, right? And possibly maybe reduce the severity of the risk. And of course, the existential risks, we don't quite know what to do there, right? That's again a whole area of debate. And I urge you to read the Ezra Klein podcast with Ben Buchanan, because that was quite good. But this is the goal. We're going to drive this down, right? We're not going to make it go away, right? Simply fixing the AI isn't going to fix the problem. So you can do something like this. Basically, look at what's of concern, what's the asset, who's the impacted group. It's kind of a risk vector. You could take other versions of this. This was just kind of my notional example, right? So there's the risk vector, and then there's the harms associated with that, right? Is it to a person, an organization, or an ecosystem? Um, Notice that this forces you to ask the question, oh, deepfakes, we say that's a risk. Okay, to what? How? Like, you're not going to make them go away. We need to think about what's the vector on which that becomes a form of attack to manipulate a group or perhaps get an asset. And we've done this before. Again, part of the refrain I come back to is actually we've been here before. The challenge with AI, it's happening sort of everywhere all at once, but we've done it in cyber, right? Where we have education, surveillance, protection, detect, respond. You know, we can kind of look at how we do this and say, oh, maybe there's an analogy for AI. And we've done this, right? Societally, we've done it too, right? I just speed limits and, you know, your brain on drug, just duck and cover. We've done this kind of thing. So how might we do this? So this is the three quick examples. And my takeaway is you can basically use this kind of framework and hold it up as a lens against a whole bunch of different problems and see that we have a lot of work to do. So here's the three quick examples. The first one I love. It's kind of the most philosophical of all of them. And I'm a big fan of Noah Harari. I know Adam's a big fan of Noah Harari. We're both like Noah Harari fanboys. He has been one of the leading voices, I think, about thinking about AI as basically a social animal. It's a participant in society now, right? Because it can produce language. So this essay from The Economist a couple years ago, pardon me. The his point in this essay was that, sorry, his point in this essay is that it's now part of human civilization because it can tell stories. It can tell narratives. And a narrative is something that impacts us cognitively because it understands language, whether we like it or not, it's in the game. And AI, just like humans, is under no obligation to be honest, accurate, correct. It might have an agenda. It's just part of the narrative. So if this is the risk vector, and again, I'm not telling you what it's attacking yet, right? I'm saying this is a risk vector. Okay, what might it attack? It's going to attack bureaucracy. Note that, of course, this is kind of what I was studying last year, right? But it's going to attack bureaucracy. Why? Right? Why is bureaucracy the target? Because bureaucracy is principally an information processing system. Bureaucracies encode information and knowledge across generations as culture. There's a collective action bureaucracies allow us to take, and bureaucracies that are companies actually transform energy and matter into things of greater value. So the chart on the right, just to kind of ground this in a citation, right? So it's not just the Bill Regli show here. This is a great book from about 20 years ago. Eric Beinhocker was a McKinsey consultant. He wrote this book called The Origin of Wealth. And one of the images in the book is he sort of charts this world GDP per capita over millennia, ever since humans developed stone tools. And his observation is that, you know, things kind of like move along, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's this huge increase in world GDP per capita in, you know, about 1750, 1690, 1800, right around there. So the one reason for this, a lot of people immediately say, well, it's the Industrial Revolution, right? It's the ability to use something other than muscles to power things, right? I can dig ditches, I can power ships, I can do things at scale because I now have energy. I've harnessed steam, energy, and coal, and I can do things. That's certainly one reason. But his point is actually the more profound reason was the establishment of Commonwealth British common law, because it allowed us to organize systems and create corporations, whether they be the British East India Company or the Dutch West Indies Company. We built companies that weren't basically family, feudal, or religious, right? We basically built systems that could basically do the transformation of energy and matter. And the company itself, the structures of company, is based on law and business plans, and they're just stories. So here we are, where AI is now part of the game, And democracy, republic, monarchy, partnerships, these are all just stories. So AI is going to affect this because it's going to change the scale and rate of information flows in these systems. One part of the system might 10x or 100x be amplified, but another part's still going to be human. So I'm going to have basically assets at risk because of the flows. The AI aren't aligned with the incentives. So if I have one part of the company that can improve their performance by a factor of 100, what about the other parts, right? The equilibria are out of balance because these systems are designed for human information processing rates, right? We're also going to see rates appear over time, and I'll talk about that in a minute. My takeaway here is that we don't really have the metrics to actually quantify these risks because these are socio-technical metrics, and it's more like tracking disease or testing medicine than it is about proving algorithmic correctness, right? And it's a whole different form of mathematics and statistics, and we're not talking about it that way, right? We're trying to say, well, if we fix the algorithm, it'll all be fine. And it's like, I don't think so. So how might we build bureaucracy safe AI? Well, this is, of course, super high level, but remember the matrix. So there's scientific issues and there's engineering issues. Scientifically, I need to have those organizational management science metrics. I need to basically track things over time. And then I need to basically figure out how organizational systems assimilate the AI. The engineering issues might be I need to design business processes that leverage the AI, but still keep it in control. And I got to like redesign the incentives, right? So those are social engineering, right? We can do that. We've done that before. Scientific issues, yeah, like I got to figure out what the answers to those questions are. All right. Let's do two other examples quicker, though. All right. So, directed cognitive manipulation, AKA deep fakes. AI is the vector. What are the assets under threat? So, you use a deep fake to do pig butchering, right? If you're familiar with pig butchering, great. If you're not, I urge you to watch This Week Tonight with John Oliver for a dark and hilarious take on pig butchering. But the idea is that I extract money from you via building a fake relationship, right? And I do it over time. Now that I have generative AI, I can have basically AI agents. Maybe those AI agents look like people you went to high school with, and they're synthetic voices because I just need a little snippet of their voice from the high school play that their mother put online. Guess what? Your high school girlfriend's like texting you and building a relationship with you illicitly. All right. But what assets are under threat? So here's where the threat vector that I talked about earlier is actually like depends, right? What do I care about? Do I care about me, my money, protecting my money? This is individual harm. My response to that technologically and socially will be different than if what I care about is the financial health of the bank that has my money, right? Or the collective trust of the financial system, which is another, organization that would be under threat, but I now have to mitigate that differently. What we hear about is mostly, in this case, number one, how do I protect you so you don't transfer your retirement savings into Bitcoin? So the idea, though, is going to be to reduce the risk through processes. It's probably not a technological innovation. You're not going to stop the deepfakes. And we do this now. We basically do it with withdrawal limits, account cosigners, two-factor authentication, et cetera. These are all remediations that don't touch AI at all because the AI can't be fixed. It's just going to do this. And this is like what's amazing to me is people, we got to stop deepfake. We got to detect them. It's like, well, it's a losing battle. It'd be better to think about the organizational response because there's where we can make some progress. All right, last example, and then I'll bring it home. Think of a longitudinal risk. I'm somebody who is a doctor or I'm authoring analytical documents and I'm now using AI, OpenAI deep research to help me do my reports. Okay, this is great. Or I'm using AI agents to help me with my medical diagnosis. It amplifies cognitive tasks. But here's what's going to happen. It might do better. It might do a lot better, right? But there's still going to be mistakes. There's still going to be occasionally a mistake. The issue is I don't know what those mistakes are going to look like, right? It might be that I accept something from the AI that is wrong, or the AI prompts me in a way that I make a decision that turns out to be wrong. But these are different kinds of mistakes than the kinds of mistakes I make now, right? So mistakes are still going to happen, but the nature of the mistakes is going to change. And over time, the human side of the team is going to see their skills change. And I present one example of that one where if you're MGM, there was a big cyber attack fall of 2023, which shut down the electronic systems that support the hotels in Las Vegas that MGM operates. And guess what? You got 25,000 guests and they can't do anything because there's no human capability to do what the machines had then been delegated, right? So we've delegated something to the machine, and over time, my skills and training change, and then all of a sudden the machine, then I'm in trouble. So we've seen this before. Most relevant is the notion of the calculator effect, which is an actual phenomena studied by those in the education community, looking at the effect on learning mathematics due to the introduction of the calculator in the 70s. Instead of learning the mechanics of mathematics, you now have a calculator. You still make mistakes, but you make a different kind of mistake. The skill I need to train is a different kind of skill. And we're seeing exactly this phenomena with programming and other areas where the AI technology is immediately creating a skills change right away. So a couple other points as I bring it home. So as we adopt AI, we're going to have mistakes. There are going to be failures. We have to think about how to look for these risks. Fixing the individual components isn't necessarily going to help. There's a famous example of the Ariane V88, which had terrific components. All the components were tested. It worked great in the previous version. And when they launched the 88, there was some phenomena that it saw in the real world. And guess, a huge system failure due to some floating point errors that weren't previously anticipated. So you can have perfect components, but the real world might expose it to things that the perfect components didn't see, and how those components interact is going to be an issue. The railroad technology I already gave. Railroads had failures. They introduced things like the semaphores and time zones to improve the performance of the railroads. We're going to have this happen all at once. I can have unbiased AI, but humans are still biased. You can't fix people. So again, there's a kind of a whole question here that you got to put the human in the loop in order to understand what's going on. One thing to think about is that maybe we have AI wrong. Henry Farrell and Cosma Shazili, Henry Farrell's at George Mason and Cosma Shazili's at CMU, said, look, maybe AI isn't a technology. Maybe it's more like the free market. Maybe it is an abstraction, which we trust the free market to allocate prices, but we don't really know how it works. We poke it occasionally. It, has a market spike. Occasionally there's tulip bulb phenomena, but like the market does something. So AI might be actually better thought of as a different kind of ecosystem that's not really a computing thing, but it's more like some other kind of creature that you see in economics, psychology, anthropology, finance, public health. It's gonna look more like that. And the safety risk questions then are fundamentally social science questions about the AI human coevolution, right? So is this the best of all possible worlds? Well, what Candide concludes is that the world is what the world is, but we have to cultivate our garden. That's control what we can. And cultivating the garden is the way to bring joy. So what does that mean for us? Well, we got to watch for new surprises and risks of some kinds, right? They're going to come out. We better watch for them. And then when they show up, we got to deal with them. AI is serious business. I think that has become quite evident. So we need to treat it that way, which means maybe you need an NTSB for AI. You need external processes to vet and standardize, etc. External processes might be able to manage AI. For example, if AI helps with drug discovery, great. But I still need to test the drugs in animals, and I still need to test the drugs in people, and that's going to take time. And actually, Dario, I forget how do I pronounce Dario's last name, from Anthropic, his paper, Machines of Loving Grace, talks exactly about this, this impedance mismatch. I think one of the things to take away is that we've got a crisis, and maybe we have to shift the paradigm to be more socio-technical. Think of AI's use in a social system. So to conclude with a story, 2015, I'm the DARPA DSO Deputy Director, and we're running the DARPA Robotics Challenge in Pomona, California. And as you can tell, I'm kind of an extrovert. So I'm basically tapped with doing tours. Any VIPs who came, I got to show them the robot pit and the command centers, and we go down the field, and it was a lot of fun. Congressmen come by, local dignitaries, and then at some point, I get told Elon Musk is coming. Wouldn't you be willing to do the tour? And I go, okay, great, I'll do the tour. So Elon comes with his then wife. I don't know which one it was, and then one of his triplets, one of the boys, who was at that time about 8 or 9, and he flew in on his helicopter, came in his stretch Tesla, kid you not. We get out, hello, pleasantries, and then we do the tour. And I'm, engaging him. I'm trying to, show him the Atlas robot, show him the chimp robot from CMU. And then at some point, I'm trying to engage his son. And I sort of bend over and I, meet him eye level. I said, hey, you have any questions that I could answer? And the kid goes, and I'm not making this up. I mean, his kid goes in a very erudite voice. He says, yes, can you tell me one thing AI has done that's good for humanity? And I was like, all right, this is great. Sort of look up at Elon. Elon's tall. He's about 6'2" or something. I sort of says, thank you for asking me this question. I get to answer it in front of your dad. And I said to him, I said, look, think of AI as like, the Apollo project. When we went to the moon, originally it was like, we're going to go to the moon and, learn what the moon is and come back. And, Kennedy's famous speech. I said, look, actually what we learned was when we came around and saw this picture, we realized going to the moon was more about us. It was more about humanity, our role in the universe, than it was about us getting to the moon. And I think AI's journey is very much about understanding where we fit in all of this. So I said that. I looked at Elon. I said, how'd I do? I think he acknowledged it. But the good news was the DARPA director, when she heard what I said, she just gave me a giant hug. So that was the best answer. And I sort of agreed at the time. So main message here, AI risks exist in a context. They're not an abstraction. The sources of risk, one's going to be amplification, one's going to be externalities. If you can find something that doesn't fall in one of those two buckets, I want to hear it. The types of risk, there's a scientific risk and there's an engineering risk, both based on the limits. Management of risk, I'm thinking of it as a defense in depth type of thing. Solutions to risk might not require fixing AI, just fix how we use it. And we have to shift to a socio-technical view of these systems. So here we are. Did I learn to stop worrying? Well,
yeehaw.
Well, I kind of feel like this is the picture. And I kind of feel like that's me. And we're going somewhere, and I'm gonna just try and enjoy the ride. So anyway, I hope this is helpful and gives you some framing for how to think about these problems. My apologies if I went a little fast. I was trying to be conscious of the time, and it seems like if we have time for questions, I've done pretty good given that I started 5 minutes late. So because of
which is my fault. I'll take that.
That's all right. So anyway, that's a whole bunch of stuff. And happy to do some questions and just commit.
Yeah. Well, we got a couple of minutes to be honest, but yeah, I was gonna first of all confirm that was not an AI generated picture of Calvin and Hobbes.
No, that was I
make sure.
I have the citation. I have a citation to the actual strip. I traced all the citations down.
Check. So. Okay, speed round very quickly. First, can you confirm or deny that Hindenburg was an inside job? Pat Langley wants to know.
Oh, I don't know. Is that in Man in High Castle? I don't know. I don't know which book I need to reid to confirm.
Right, he's playing dumb.
But the whole point is that hydrogen, it blows up, right? Like,
okay, so in the absence of other questions, go ahead and put your hands up if you want to ask. I will fill, well, gosh, it's only about 60 seconds now, but as always, so many questions to include, like, you're the director of an AI division at a university. What the hell do you do in this landscape? But let's shelve that for the moment. First, here's my hypothesis, is as you pointed at the end, this is a liminal technology. It's a technology that's really calling into question like our cultural categories, our sense of selves. And so actually what you're seeing is a lot of, you mentioned the error of imagination. I'm seeing a lot of error of nerve too. Like if that's true, it's kind of really inconvenient and it's hard because it's going to force us to think differently. And that's tough. So I'd rather just call it a stochastic parrot. I'd rather just say it's statistics on steroids, right? How do you, yeah. Are you seeing that as well from people?
I like the way you're summarizing it. I mean, I do think this is it's kind of like a bigger deal than
Yeah.
people realize, but not for the reason people realize, right?
Yes.
Like
That's fair.
again, it is like I go to what I said to Elon, right? It's like, well, it's less about like all the rocket and the no, it's more about like, dude, like we exist in a whole different context now where these machines are part of the whole system. And I think our brains haven't really kind of grokked that. Like we have enough trouble dealing with the fact that the social systems have connected us all,
Yeah.
eight
Yeah. I wonder.
billion squared connections, right? So I guess if the question is, am I seeing that? The answer is yes. I think that there's some awareness. We need a better framing for the crisis
I
because
was going to say story, right? We need a better story of what's happening. In some
well,
sense.
it goes. I mean, it goes to. I got it right over here, right? It goes to this, right? I mean, it's structure of scientific revolutions. I mean, you're at a point where everybody sees there's something wrong. Nobody knows what to do about it, and that's Thomas Kuhn's definition of a crisis: is when like your ability to measure and understand like breaks down, and it's pretty clear, like you know, we're flying down the hill and I don't know that the little steering wheel on the wagon is actually telling us anything, right? So,
Right. And people dropping off is understood, but I want to ask one totally unfair question while you're here,
yeah.
for those who are hanging in there. You are now the director of DARPA. What are you going to do about this, man? What programs are you going to run in this space to advance our ability to deal with this surprise?
The AI surprise in particular.
Well, I mean, as you framed it, so that framework, how do we deal with what's up in the right upper right quadrant, which is where DARPA is supposed to be?
Yeah. So if I was again, I'm not going to answer an AGI question or a compete with other countries question. I'm going to ask like, let's practically speaking, what do you do? Well, I think this is especially given that AI is writing most of the software now. There's a whole different kind of engineering of the information system that we're doing where the AI again is a participant. So I now have to think, I need a whole different kind of process by which I engineer human machine systems and the machine. So we think in terms of like an organization, there's workflows and organizations, and if you buy SAP, they'll help automate the work. Well, no, like I got to rethink the whole thing. So there's kind of this AI process re-engineering thing that needs to occur, which I think is software. I think it's human factors. I think it's AI, and I think it involves a lot of kind of this economic modeling that you might need to do to understand what these flows are. So, could you bring all those together to solve one or two challenge problems in large AI systems? Yeah, maybe. So you have some. If I was a DARPA director and I wanted to have a couple of capstone programs, it might be here are two moonshotty things, and on the way, I want you to build the framework that'll let me do this better, differently, and faster.
Yeah. All right, well, you got my vote, especially since you use the word social science or word social science for it.
Right, exactly.
I also think, yeah, your point about security engineering is really relevant. We've been talking a lot about that here. USC has a strong history in aerospace security engineering. It's amazing what you
Yeah.
can do because it's actually more than just engineering. It's all these other things involved.
Well, it's again like AI is a lot like flight worthiness, right? I say drug design. Another analogy is well, aerospace. You do this all the time. You do flight worthiness. I mean,
And it's just
the plane doesn't crash,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think that's the level. And then what's missing then though is when you look at the people who publish in these areas, like imagine me talking about flight worthiness by saying, well, my speed dial works. I mean, like, well, dude, the plane, I don't care how fast it's going. The flight worthiness is the whole thing. People are only talking about the components, right? They're talking about these algorithmic components that if I make that component better, the plane will fly. It's like, no, I mean, at some point, the plane flies and all the components are faulty. But the issue is what the faults are and you have the redundant. It's like the mentality is different as opposed to say maybe the mathematician's mentality, which is, well, I'm just going to prove it. I can come up with a better algorithm. It's like,
Yeah, the formal proof is very in vogue right now. It's an interesting question along those lines. All right. Well, so I'm conscious of everybody else's time. Thank you for those who have attended. You can see why every opportunity I get to have a beer with Bill, I take entirely, because he's
Good
like
time.
he's like a one-man Thomas Kuhn.
No, you just had me in a moment here, and you hit play, and this is the thing.
All right. Well, and
Well, I
again,
know I'm tagging up with a couple people over the course of the afternoon, so I look forward to meeting a few of you more, and hopefully this was useful. So.
thanks, Bill.
You have a good weekend.